Ren Zheng Fei has only ever wanted one thing: to build a global company in China that could rival the best in the world. And that is exactly what he's done. Mr. Ren started Huawei with just 3 staff and $2,500 in Shenzhen, one of China's special economic zones.
When
I first started out 30 years ago, the communications industry was on the brink of enormous changes. Changes equivalent to thousands of years in the history of mankind, all in the span of 3 decades. Back then, we didn't really have any telephones. The only phones we had were those hand-cranked phones that you see in old World War II films. We were pretty undeveloped then. Huawei started out by making simple equipment for rural markets. Instead of spending the money we earned, we invested it back into the business, making more and more advanced equipment. We were lucky China was developing its network industry on a big scale at the time. That's how we found a market for our goods. If we tried to start a business today, I don't know if we would be successful. We worked for survival rather than for ideals. How could we possibly have ideals then? Our priority was to survive.
Today, Huawei is the top telecoms network equipment seller in the world. How did you do this?
I am an ambitious man. If someone can focus on one thing, then they will definitely succeed. I was focused on communications technology. If I had focused on raising pigs, I might have become a pig expert. If I had focused on making tofu, I might have become the king of tofu. Unfortunately, I chose communications. This industry is very challenging. We did this without really understanding just how high the barrier to entry was. But we started anyway, and there was no turning back. Because if we pulled out, then we would have lost everything. I had spent all of my initial investment and would have ended up begging on the streets. So we had to keep forging ahead one step at a time.
Today, Huawei has sprawled out to become a global tech giant. I had a chance to see the scale of that growth when I arrived on Huawei's newest European-style campus in Shenzhen. This is one of the 3 campuses Huawei has here.
They have their own train.
This campus alone is the size of 345 football fields.
Wow. I cannot believe they built this in the middle of an industrial city.
Around the world, it now has over 180,000 workers, and it's done all of this in just 3 decades. By any standards, that's an astronomical rate of growth. But it's not just about how big Huawei has become. It's gone from a company aspiring to be Apple to one who's selling more smartphones than Apple. And it's been able to achieve this, Mr. Ren says, because it's a privately owned company, not at the mercy of shareholders, so it's free to decide its own vision of the future.
Why have we succeeded while other companies found it difficult? Publicly listed companies have to pay a lot of attention to their balance sheets. They can't invest too much, otherwise profits will drop and so will their share prices. At Huawei, we fight for our ideals. We know that if we fertilize our soil, it will become more bountiful. That's how we've managed to pull ahead and succeed.
Every year, Huawei invests up to $20 billion in R&D, putting it in the top 5 companies for such investment in the world. While some American telecom giants were cutting jobs and closing labs, Huawei pumped billions of dollars into new areas of research. Li Pengfei is an engineer at Huawei. His team works on what the company calls fundamental questions, areas of research that don't have an immediate outcome.
For my research, it is not directly involved in profit. Most of my work is about fundamental research. In the US, my friends who work in Apple, who work in Google, they work really hard. And they have a lot of freedom on their research. And I basically have the similar freedom and similar environment like they do have. We Chinese people, we are trying to develop. We are trying to be better, right? We're learning, and we're trying our best.
But some think it's not just investment into R&D that's enabled Huawei to pull ahead of its rivals.
Both sets of charges expose Huawei's brazen and persistent actions to exploit American companies and financial institutions and to threaten the free and fair global marketplace.